As we begin to move into meditation, let's adjust physically so that we can relax and begin the meditation by starting to relax the body in every way we can figure. Letting the breath be part of the relaxation as we breathe in. Let us feel life coming in. As we breathe out, let us relax. Let's open our hearts while we're doing this. Perhaps we're breathing into the heart and letting the breath be the vehicle, or we're seeing the face of someone we love. We're just repeating the word love, open, love, open. Or maybe we're just easy with our hearts and let it open naturally. As we settle deeper into our hearts, let us begin to have compassion for ourselves. For all that we have worried about, all that we have suffered from, all that we have lost, all that we are losing, all that is disappointed, let us hold it in our hearts and send it love. Cradling yourself in your own heart. Be kind, be healing, be tender. Now let us open to the depth of who we are. That all that has happened, we are more than that. And that nothing can touch that. The depth of who we are is completely filled with possibilities. Our unfolding is a given. So as we move toward the silence of this meditation, let us focus on our depth, the source, our possibilities.
Give us this day our daily bread. You said you would supply all my needs according to your riches. I have but to ask, and I shall receive. To go from here and share this love you gave to me, to show someone who's lost and help them find their way, the way to truth and faith, so they can be free like me, free like me. Lord, we are your love. Lord, we are your peace. Lord, we are your joy. This day.
Chris, for playing with us. Thank you, Chris. Today is, I'm starting a mini series on the first principle, but I want to tell you first off, before we do anything else, that we have a congregational meeting at the end of the month, last Sunday of the month. We're going to have that. And so the first principle is about there is only one presence, one power, only one presence, one power in my life and in the world, God the good, omnipotent. And I would like to unpack that rather slowly for you. I do believe this idea is one of the deepest things that Unity's ever said, one of the hardest to grok, and one of the ones that if you do get it, it becomes something that changes the way you see the world. And so if we pay attention to the depth of this statement, I think we might actually have a breakthrough in our understanding of a new way of seeing how the world is. And oddly enough, I would like to couple that with the Martin Luther King celebration. So we'll see how that works. You've been warned. I'm going to start with Paul Tillich. Paul Tillich is a 20th century theologian, not a unity person, comes out of the traditional church, but was pressing forward a new way of thinking about God in his book, Shaking of the Foundations, which was, I think it was about in the 70s, I can't remember. The name of this infinite and inexhaustible depth and ground of all being is God. That depth is what the word God means. And if that word has not much meaning for you, translate it and speak of the depths of your life, of the source of your being, of your ultimate concern, of what you take seriously without reservation. Perhaps in order to do so, you must forget everything traditional that you have learned about God, perhaps even the word itself. For if you know that God means depth, you know much about, if you know that the word God means depth, you know much about him, you cannot then call yourself an atheist or an unbeliever. For you cannot think or say, life has no depth. Life is shallow. Being itself is surface only. If you could say this in complete seriousness, then you would be an atheist, but otherwise you're not. He who knows about depth knows about God. And so Which brings me really to the problem of the word God, in my opinion, and why I've been accused of not saying it enough in church. I don't like the word particularly, and I really don't like to use it in this setting. Because when we do, for those of us who grew up in traditional Christian churches, or Jewish churches, or even Muslim churches, or sometimes Hindu churches, what we get is a picture of a person or a thing that we can say, there it is. That's God. I know what God is like. Whenever you define a thing, whenever you put the brackets around it, or even the image of it, it is a form of idolatry when you're talking about God. If you can define it, if you have a picture for it, then you have made it concrete, made it smaller than it is, made it less. Because this thing we're going to be talking about is really not something you can put in your pocket. It's not something you can claim, my God does this for us and will not do that for you. This is the antithesis of depth. Because what is at depth for all of us is the same thing. What is at depth for life is the same thing. What is at depth for the universe is the same thing. And it is well beyond our traditional words to give it its proper meaning. So if you say, I know God, I wonder which one you're talking about. Or God says, this often confounds me to no end. God says, blah, blah, blah. And I think, nice try. Nothing like making yourself the authority by saying you know what God says, right? Maybe you don't know what I'm saying there, but God told me this and spoke to me alone about it, and I just want you to know. What Tillich is saying is essentially that God is the before and the behind of everything, is the thing in which we live and move and have our being, as St. Paul would say. This presence is different than a person. Now, because it is essentially everything and the source of everything, it can relate personally. It can speak to you in words. It can feel like it is your best friend. It can be as close as your breath and be as much a companion as anything. It can do that. But it is also more than that. It is just like the Big Bang. And I think the Big Bang is an analogy. I wouldn't say it is God, but let's use it as an analogy of what God could be as a concept and another way of thinking of it. So think of it how the Big Bang starts. The Big Bang starts and everything unfolds out of it. It just keeps getting bigger. It's still expanding. It's still going on at this moment. The Big Bang has never stopped. And it is unfolding and creating new things. If you think about us as human beings, we've been we're at the end, I think about the last thing that of any significance that we can name that was created by the process of life and evolution. We're a long way from the first one-cell creature that was formed, and the creative process is continuing. And if we really get it down, AI will take our place and it will keep going too, right? It's just going to keep going. It keeps expanding and becoming and becoming and becoming. First it was just energy, and then it became cooled a little bit. It became matter and energy, and now it's both, and it's becoming the planets and the stars and the galaxies and human beings and everything else. It's in that process. Now, if matter or the universe, let's say, maybe it's energy we would call it. If energy can do all that, imagine that as a process of depth. That your depth goes all the way back to the Big Bang. It really does, right? Your bones and tissues are part of stars that have been burned up and exploded. And that's where we get all our elements, and all this goes down in depth and depth and depth and depth and depth. And would you say you could call that a person? A being that you could define? I don't think so. It's beyond, if we really think about it, the Big Bang is kind of beyond concept, really. It's like, it sounds like a big explosion, but it's more than that because it came from nowhere. When we think about that which we call God, we need to be thinking in a bigger way, in a way that is impersonal, as well as personal, but impersonal in so many ways. Now, in Unity, we often say God is like principle, and the reason I've often struggled with that phrase, God is principle, I think I don't get that. Here's my latest. God is principle in the sense that the principle of mathematics can be applied anywhere, right? It can be applied by people over here and people over here, and it's not diminished by being applied in two places. It can be applied about outer space and about inner space and about electronics and wherever. It doesn't get less than. It's not divided and becomes less. It is a principle. It is usable everywhere by all of us who are sentient enough to be able to use mathematics. Think of God as usable everywhere. The principle, the idea, the expansive quality of its becoming is not diminished by becoming already. It's like the universe is expanding and expanding at ever faster rates apart from itself already. It's just getting more. It's a principle of things is that it's not diminished by being used and not limited to one side or the other. And so in so many ways, in traditional warfare, we have said our God is on our side. Right, can you imagine? Math is on your side? Right? When we open to the idea that all is emerging and we are part of all of it, when you open to the idea that your body is not opposite of the earth, not a stranger to this planet, but the outgrowth of it, when you open to the idea that whatever spirit is, whatever God is, it is expanding even now, and as it expands even now, it expands as you. Not as you need to talk to it and pray to it and ask for favors, but is expanding as you. No more foreign to God than you are to dirt. For from the dirt you have come as a body, and from God you have come as spirit. You are no more different than that. You are that. The classic way of talking about God is that you're the wave on the ocean. But really, when you think about it, the wave is the ocean. The wave isn't on the ocean, separate than the ocean, slightly different than the ocean. It is the ocean. And the tidal wave and the surfable wave and the ripplet are all the ocean. No matter what shape it took, it is always the ocean. No matter what face humanity is taking in that particular place where you're sitting, you are the ocean. You are that. And the great discovery that Hindus are always after is the realization that I am that. And what is that? The ocean. That which I am seeking is me. This problem of God, in my opinion, is that we have maintained the same name, even as the possibility of our understanding has changed. Primitive way of understanding what was animating the world was to say it must look like us. That's primitive and current. That God has human qualities, that God is angry, that God is vengeful, that God loves some people and doesn't love other people. What an idiotic thing to say. And said all the time. And do you not think that all the problems we have with white supremacy, isn't somewhere grounded in the idea that God likes us better? Now, I was talking, I want to parenthetically, this is a little bit off the God topic, but I want to talk, I want to talk about something current. And that is, yesterday we did this Braver Angels workshop, and we had a good turnout. And Rebecca, I want to thank you for that, and all the people you brought to help. And maybe it's what Braver Angels is how do you talk to people from a different political ilk, or a different religious ilk, or a different something? How do you engage them in such a way that you don't bring your own prejudice to the situation and poison the conversation and keep it from advancing? And sometimes you can do it and sometimes you can't. Give them that. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a man who was cutting down trees in the lot next to my house. And I had never met the guy before. But he was from North Carolina, and so am I. And so we had that going on, and we were talking about he was some town that was close to my town, and yada, yada. And we were talking, I was really, really working this guy because they wanted him to cut down a tree that was next to my property. And so we're in this conversation, and we're getting along really well. He reaches in his pocket, and he pulls out a medallion that he had bought from somebody recently for $20. It was a medallion with a swastika cut out of it. And I looked at it, and I don't know what that means. Is it the curiosity of something from World War II, or is he trying to signal me something like, we're both white, or something like that? And as I looked at it, I suspended my judgment, because I went, I don't really know. And it's really, I still need him to cut down the tree. And so I don't. And as I was looking at this and thinking about that, I tried to understand him, which is sort of the Braver Angels thing, is to try to understand them, not just be yourself, right? And I said, so what is, you'll forgive me, I hope, if this feels like a bar, but I said, so what is white racism? What is white supremacy? But doesn't it start with, I want to do well by my people, right? Doesn't it start with, I want my family to be safe? Doesn't it start with all those things that everybody wants? It's just gone berserk, right? It's gone to the extreme, to the exclusion of others. It says that I want mine, and if I have mine, you can't have yours. That's when it falls apart. Because doesn't every black person want their family to do well? Doesn't every brown person want their family to be safe? Aren't we all the same in that same way? It's just when it says, if I get mine, I can only have it by you not having yours, or you having less. This is when we go awry. And this is kind of back to God now, back to God. God doesn't say, for you to have yours, somebody has to have less. It says, this idea of complete depth and possibility says that if you want what you want, great, but it doesn't mean I am yours. It means You're part of this great unfolding, and use your good for your good. And if you're wise, you'll also use your good for others as well. And so this thing that seems like is going to separate us could also be the one that says, oh, so I am everybody's origin and everybody's destiny. For we're all that. And even though this wave that I'm talking to may, and I mean may, I don't know, hold views that are pretty unpleasant in my mind, is he not the wave also? And that person that seems so scary to me, are they not the wave also? And I think of Gaza and Palestine and Israel, and they are they not all Semitic people even? They're all the same shaped wave in the first place, and yet they go, my wave actually is a slightly different wave. And I shall not know how to treat you as a brother because for some minor difference. We can see it over there so easily. Sometimes in our family, sometimes with our acquaintances, we don't see it as easily. We get angry with them for being the way they are. Do we not? Yeah, are we not judging? And so I think if you think about there is only one presence, one power, you begin to be less judgmental. It's one of the benefits. It's like if there's only one of us here, how could I be so judgmental here? How could I be superior? It seems I'm the same water that they are. Jesus said something that's often been hard to hear. A man comes to him and says, hey, your brothers and mother are outside. And Jesus is doing his thing, and he goes, who is my mother and brother? Everybody's my mother and brother. The person who does the will of God is my mother and brother. Basically, it's another way of saying, those who have done to the least of these have done it to me. Because he's saying, even though they're related, and these guys are not, we're in this together. We're just one big happy family. Well, they're maybe not happy yet, but we're one big family of humanity. And that is one of the benefits of seeing your God is not a human being, is more impersonal, not about giving favors and withholding favors. And your prayer, as we will get to later in this series, your prayer is not there to change God's mind. Because the principle of math doesn't need to be changed for it to work for you. What needs to work for it is your intelligence needs to change. You need to be smart enough to know how to use it. You need to be in line with the principle to get the right answer. You need to know that 2 and 2 is 4. You need to know that, right? Because if you miss that, it's your fault, not the principle's fault. And it's your gift to yourself, not so much it was because you're a favored person. You're all favored. You're all wanted. This unfolding, the dynamism of nature, if you notice that nature is putting out all, until we start getting rid of the species, it has a species in every niche. It wants every different place, every different way of doing it. It wants every one of them, even mosquitoes. Right? It's got saints and mosquitoes in the same planet. Right? This God thing. It's why I use the divine more often, or don't even talk about it. Because most of the time, if you've noticed, when I get up here and talk, I don't talk about God, I talk about you, or me, us. I talk about us. And our failure to perceive clearly. Because when we perceive clearly, we're on the God path. We're on the way. Do you know what I mean? And one of the things that I'm going to say boldly, with a bit of trepidation, is that the nature of this unfolding is always toward more and greater freedom. I'll give you my reasoning. That essentially, when the Big Bang happened, it was raw energy, boom, not a lot of subtlety there. Gradually, some of it condensed into what we call hydrogen, and that started a whole process that started stars, and that started all the explosion that caused the condensing of hydrogen into different elements and all that. And it's getting more complex. It's getting really kind of interesting. And then there's rocks. And rocks are pretty cool, but they ain't going anywhere fast. They do. The average Earth's surface turns over every 500 million years, but that's a change, but it's not happening very fast. The pace picks up when you get to plants. There's a bit of dynamism. It picks up a lot more. There's a lot more freedom and dynamism that happens when you get to animals, and when you get to this top dog animal that we are, there's an enormous amount of freedom and possibility that happens. There's movement that can happen, both mental, physical, even emotional and psychological. There's movement, there's depth. And if you think how deep you are from all that, there you're talking about God, the depth of you there, but also the cutting edge, the leading edge of all this is freedom. To move, to be, to expand, to become, to change, to transform. That's where this whole shebang is going. And I relate it to something I did this morning. Frying pan. I have cast iron frying pan. And so it takes oil. So I'm going to cook some eggs. I put some oil in there and I lean it over. You've done this, right? You lean it over and the sheen of it goes, but it misses some places. These places become isolated from the oil, right? And the reason they're isolated is surface tension of the oil that's there isn't letting it get in there. The surface tension is holding it back, right? And so whenever you're hanging out on the surface, you're holding God back. Because it wants to go everywhere, and your surfaceness is not helping. And when you're a white supremacist, your surface is holding the country and all your neighbors back. And so when you keep turning this thing, and sometimes it won't go until you heat it up. Maybe you have to march on Washington. Maybe you have to sing hymns. Maybe you have to take blows and not respond. Maybe you have to be the one who breaks the tension by raising the temperature. And that brings me to MLK's famous speech. I have a dream. I'm going to take it in small bites and not from the top and not from the famous line. But listen to this. No, we are not satisfied. Just stop right there. We will never be satisfied because we are God unfolding, period. The reason you're not satisfied with your life is because you are still alive. And you're still pushing, and you're still trying to fill that whole pan with all that is, right? And sometimes you have to get mad at yourself to move, or nature has to push you from behind, or something. But we will never be satisfied. And not that we can't be at peace, but we will keep moving. And to finish that sentence, no, We are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like, I changed the words, oil, and righteousness like a mighty stream. So, this is the famous clincher line. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My God, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing." And what he is saying is essentially that this freedom, which is our inheritance, but not just our inheritance, our becoming, the freedom to be, I think he says it later on. Essentially, he says in his speech, you know, the white man can't be free until the black man is free. No one who tries to get ahead by pushing the other one back has actually found the God way of becoming. They have limited the explosion of what is good. They have limited the possibility of love being made manifest. They have limited God in so many ways. And I say that with all the danger of saying that word. They have limited. When you limit another to get your good, you have limited God. And so, think of God as you. And think of God as your neighbor. And think of God as all the spaces you could be in. And think of it as all the things that you could become. Think of it as all the things that have become and are becoming and the source of it at the same time. Think of God in a way that doesn't have a face so much as it has a presence, a depth, a principle. And while at times you will think of God as a person and speak to God like you're talking to a person and beg of God and whine to God and all of that, remember to not stay there forever, but to realize that your life is unfolding. And sometimes it unfolds in ways that aren't yet beautiful to you. And yet it is unfolding. And that's the way it is. Don't want to divert. I have a friend who's dying, my best friend from California, who I leapt years ago from North Carolina onto a river trip to become a Grand Canyon river guide, and I leapt into a brand new world. It was absolutely nothing like anything I'd known before, and he caught me and was my friend. And we've been friends for 50 years. And when I think about all the people who have lived, all but the ones that are alive today are dead. This is the process. It may not be beautiful. It may not feel good. But it is the way this thing of depth operates through change and transformation. And people who you have been close to, sometimes you're no longer close to, and some people who you've wanted to be close to have died, and all these things have happened. And yet it unfolds. And yet it gets bigger. It's a mystery, isn't it? It's also one of the great requirements, I think, of this life is to somehow say, okay, to whatever's happening. Okay. That's it. Okay. Let us pray. So as we begin, let's just feel our bodies. Because you know, this body has taken the wisdom of 13.8 billion years of evolving and becoming and brought us what we are sitting in right now, what we are being as right now. So let's listen to it. Let the breath be inside the body and the mind as well. And now listen to your heart. And maybe you'll hear God speaking to you. And now go to that little last thing to be evolved, that brain of yours, and listen to it with compassion and understanding that it's new on the scene and not always great at its job yet. But it's trying. It's all emerging. The one presence, the one power is still emerging as you. So have compassion. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.